there, I'm Joey from EDH, and, well, the title of this one kind of gives things away a little bit, doesn't it? Has this ever happened to you? You are tinkering with the deck and ultimately decide, you know what, maybe I should remove this card. The way that my deck works, I think that this one is just not pulling its weight compared to what else could go into that card slot. But then you go onto some small deck building website that you may or may not have heard of called EDH, and you take a peek at that commander's page and see that, whoa, like 88% of people with that same deck are playing that card. And then you're just stuck there like, well, shoot, like, I guess maybe, should I keep it then? I mean, if so many other people are playing it, maybe I'm the one who's missing something, right? That's a weird feeling to navigate. In fact, there are a lot of weird feelings to navigate in EDH. Things that can make us feel insecure or a little unsure about how we play Commander or how we build our decks, and as a result, make us feel weird about how we relate to other players. So grab a drink, pull up a chair, hit the likes and the subscribes, and let's chat about the tenuous world of EDH insecurities. To be 100% honest, I'm actually not even sure if I'm ready to make this video, because talking about insecurities, even in something like gaming, inevitably means revealing and hyperanalyzing some of your own, which is kind of a daunting thing to give over to an entire internet. But I've been trying to put words to some of these abstract concerns for a while now, and after a long enough time, it's just like, have I just been pushing this off simply as a way of avoiding ever having to talk about it? Like, I kind of feel if I don't make this video now, I might never make it. So let's confront some hangups. To address that first example of you thinking a card isn't all that grand, but then you see it's crazy popular, so you second guess yourself. I mean, let's cut right to the chase, right? It's your deck. You should play what you want. As I've joked about in the past, the website is called EDH Rec, as in recommendations. It's not called EDH Prescription or EDH You're Forced to Play These Cards. The entire point of this channel is to invite more critical thinking about the things that raw, naked data cannot tell us. That's why EDH Rec has so many other tools to help you better interrogate those numbers, such as the advanced filters to help you better sort out the recommendations that you get. That's why we've done videos explaining how to use those features, or why we've done videos about the precon effect that can crop up in the data, or videos about how it's totally okay to cut good cards from your deck. And in effect, that first example that I led with is largely covered by that last idea I just mentioned. It's your deck, and it's okay to cut good cards from your deck, even if those cards are super popular. Numbers on a website are just numbers. They're not going to do anything. Statistics also mean nothing to the individual. And any naysayers that you encounter who try to tell you what you, quote, should do are fundamentally wrong. You playing what you like is far more important. But often it's not just that we're trying to play what we like, right? Often it's that we actually are trying to optimize or tune up, so play what you enjoy isn't alone a solution, because what you enjoy is finding the best build and the most effective cards, and the confusion that got you here in the first place is how to make that best build, even if you are apparently outnumbered in your opinion of what that would be. In a way, that can feel like a version of peer pressure, where you don't want to be alone in your stance, and at the back of your mind, you worry that you're the one doing it wrong. And in the interest of transparency, here I am saying we and using language that includes you, the viewer, in on these experiences, but like, for all I know, this is just a me thing, and no one else out there can relate to this experience, and I'm just overthinking it. Wouldn't be the first time. I literally made a video about how just tuning up my mana rocks made me lose my mind one time. And being even more transparent, I'm over here on a YouTube channel that gets a decently regular amount of viewership, and I spend a lot of time putting my thoughts into words about the card choices that I make, and of course I also have a personal desire, as well as a YouTube reinforced incentive, to make sure that I am crafting videos that are entertaining and informative for you to watch. Which altogether basically means that by the time I'm even recording one of these, I'm presenting myself a certain way. A way that's pretty confident. A way that's presentational. This is obviously the curse of all social media, right? Social media doesn't reward people who hem and haw. It rewards people who speak authoritatively. It rewards bold statements. You know, this is often why you'll see some really bad opinions floating around online, not just about Magic, but like about things in general, because saying something with conviction is guaranteed to get you more engagement. And those platforms really want more engagement. They want you to stay on their website for longer. Plus, sometimes it feels risky to say that you don't know jack all. Like, on the one hand, saying that kind of thing might make you appear more human, more relatable, but on the other hand, it can give people permission to just tune you out, to decide that you're unhelpful, that your advice is bad, that you're not worth listening to, whatever. Point being, posts online and even videos like this one can give that false impression that other people all around you definitely 100% have everything figured out. Even though they don't. Because no one does. Everyone goes around feeling awkward and anxious, even if it doesn't look like it from the outside. And very plainly, these pressures don't just apply to culture online. They also happen on like a playgroup level, or when you're at a game store, when you're talking with a friend about how you want to tune up a deck. The reason that I'm making a video about these weird anxieties on a Magic the Gathering YouTube channel is because they can affect how we game, and they can get in the way of us improving at that game. When you feel pressure to blend in, you don't feel emboldened to make your own choices, and that limits your experiences, which halts your ability to grow and learn from those new things. And I've described an example of, looking at EDH Rec and feeling that sense of peer pressure, but I think it's important to interrogate where that feeling of pressure actually comes from. Well, it comes from ourselves, right? It comes from our own fear of the judgment of others. The pressure that we feel from that EDH Rec example is actually just a future projected worry about how other players in real life will react to our decisions. In Magic, we pride ourselves on being clever deck builders, on making cool plays, on having decent card evaluation. So when something occurs that makes any of those foundations feel a little shakier, it can literally feel like you got hit in some of the places that make you you. When you tell a friend, yeah, I'm thinking of cutting that, super popular card from my commander deck, and then that person responds with surprise, even polite surprise, that insecurity perks up. Immediately your brain is like, well, a person whose opinion I trust and value disagrees with my evaluation or conclusion. Okay, hopefully I can unpack it with them in this moment, but am I not grasping something that is super obvious to them? Something psychically stings. Or say you're known in your friend group as the person who knows the rules really well, or who knows a whole lot of cards. So often you're the one that people come to with questions about how these cards work and how good they are. And even though there's obviously no malice at all in those requests, you can't help but feel a little bit stressed about it because there's that psychic pressure to be the one who has the answers, to live up to that role and to help out. And then you worry that when you do give advice, even if you felt confident in it, what if that advice turns out to not work out for them? And then does it feel like you've let them down a little? Once again, there's that sting. And perhaps the ultimate example, when you make a play that makes sense to you, but maybe after the battle, everyone else is like, yeah, that was probably the moment that cost you the game, unfortunately. Or maybe that move kind of handed the game to X other player. Even if people are polite about it, that worry is rearing back up in your mind anyway, right? It feels like a performance anxiety. And when you look back at your decision making from that moment, maybe your confidence in your own abilities feels a little shaken, which of course will affect the future games that you play. Sting, sting, sting. In each of these instances, I mean, it's just a card game, so it feels like the pressure should be low, right? And it is. But we put a lot of ourselves into this game, especially this version of it, the format that is social and focused on self-expression. So when your expression of self and your social choices raise some eyebrows, it turns out those things have a direct pathway right to a vulnerable spot in your brain. And it becomes especially potent if that insecurity is tied to a worry that your play or your card choices caused a form of collateral damage for other players. That it didn't just cost you the game, but it also cost someone else their game too. To offer a specific example, think of a play that has a high degree of risk. I think we mentioned this in a recent EDH Rec podcast, the example of intentionally playing into someone else's Haymaker card, such as a Smothering Tithe. You take the risk of purposefully drawing some extra cards, letting that player get the extra treasures, which of course allows them to advance their board state faster than the rest, and you do so because you're secretly sitting on, say, a board wipe, a card that will ruin them once they're out of cards in hand, once they're overextended. On the outside, it looks like you're just carelessly feeding them mana, but secretly, you're baiting them into a board wipe. Only maybe the math doesn't work out in your favor. That one more turn that you thought you'd get doesn't come after all. That advancement of mana turned out to be just enough for them to get lethal one turn faster than you expected. So, the game is over, and now to the rest of the table. Well, the other players probably feel like they lost for reasons that were completely outside of their control. And while in some cases it's possible to try and explain, here's what my plan was going to be, that doesn't always happen. That isn't always possible. Or sometimes it comes off as you being overly defensive. And either way, you're still there at the end with that sting of worry that you cost other people a good game. That by doing something that just didn't pan out the way you'd hoped, you deflated someone else's fun. And of course, in moments like that last example, there are sometimes people who are just real wads about it. We've all met that kind of player who gets very vocal about what they perceive to be someone else's misplay. And most of the time, if someone's being a jerk about it, it gets easier to write off, right? The sting is a little bit less. Like, girl, you don't know what's in my hand. You don't have the full context. And even if you think it's a bad move, it's my move to make, not yours. But even if it's a little bit less, it never completely goes away, right? Like lurking at the back of your mind, there's still that sting of, well, but are they right? Even if they're being a jerk about it, did I mess up in a huge way? Am I right now just being defensive about it because my brain really doesn't want that douchebag to be right? And you know what? Intellectually, you know that judging an event just by its end results is flawed logic. You can make all of the right moves and still lose, or make some wrong moves and still win. So if they're judging just based off of an end result, you know that's bunk. Logically, you know that results-oriented thinking is flawed thinking. But emotionally, you just can't help but worry, but did I F up? Am I actually really bad at this? And then there's this wild irony that even in the absence of those kinds of douchebags, even when you're only surrounded by people who have been very polite about those kinds of moments, who are very vocal about not casting judgment about those kinds of things that happen in game, even then, sometimes you still can feel that sting. Frankly, this can come up in any instance, not just in that risky example, not just in game examples. It's just a crappy feeling to carry around, that worry that you punctured someone else's good time. And it looms especially large over our hobbies, which we go to precisely to escape from those kinds of stressors. Now, of course, there are going to be people who can't relate to that last part whatsoever. Specifically, we've heard from many people who loudly and proudly proclaim that they don't care at all about other people's fun, and they think it's ridiculous to feel any sense of responsibility in helping to create an environment that other people enjoy. As you can probably tell from my tone, I don't think very highly of that attitude. I find it to be myopic and solipsistic. I care a lot about my opponents having a good time, and that can take many forms, whether we're all kicking back to have a chill game, or whether we're all leaning forward to give it our all. And there's a lot of overlap between those two things. I care a lot that my friend Tamiya has a great game, but I'm also going to murk her commander ASAP, because if I don't, she's going to be able to attack for 400 damage, and she's going to do the same thing back to me. That's what I want to spend time with, not the other thing. If someone tells me that they don't care about another person's feelings or enjoyment, I'll regard them as the kind of person who doesn't care about other people's feelings or enjoyment. I'll believe you. But just like flatly, it doesn't make sense to me to be antisocial in the social format. And you know, often I see this crowd caricature other players as like whiny or salty whenever they get called out on the fact that they're harshing the vibes. Or they'll go to a defense such as, it's just a game, when they're trying to save face, or when they're trying to insist that it's ridiculous for other people to be bothered by their behavior. Which is also just very, very funny to me, you know, because it's just a game is a pretty poor excuse to not take other people seriously. Ultimately, they are right. It's just a game. It's just a game. So it's wild if you can't scrounge up that kind of respect for other people's time during something as low stakes as just a game. It's just a game isn't a defense for unsportsmanlike behavior. It's telling on yourself. So yeah, there are going to be people who haven't ever felt any of the stings that I've described in this video, and if that's you, move along, I guess. This whole side tangent isn't about trying to convince any of those folks out of their ways. They've already made their attitudes very clear, and I hear from them pretty constantly about what they think of me. And no, I don't mean in the YouTube comments, by the way. Like, if people want to antagonize you, they do not limit it to one place. The internet affords them many ways to do so. Videos like this aren't for them, they're for you. In my opinion, the thing to do with negativity is to funnel it into something that's productive for the benefit of cool people. Now, not everyone is going to agree with me on that. You know, you don't want to feed the trolls. Their whole thing is that want to get a rise out of you, right? Giving them attention means giving them power, and no one has power over you unless you give it to them, and all of that. And I get it. But I guess, to sort of explain it here, I think that sweeping the ugly realities under the rug, to me, it just feels a little bit untrue. Rendering something unspeakable feels like surrendering even more power. So I'd rather find a way to speak on these experiences and make them constructive for other people, you know, make an example out of it. That way, others who do care, maybe, hopefully, don't feel so alone. You know, basically, I don't want to give the false impression that you should never let any of these things bother you. Because then when they do bother you, which of course they do, our brains are just like that sometimes, then when they do bother you, you feel guilty for letting them bother you. So now you don't just have one thing bringing you down, you have two things bringing you down. Which, no, screw that, I want no part of that, nuh-uh. Now, a pretty common piece of advice to try and combat insecurity or anxiety is that you shouldn't care so much what other people think, right? Well, I've not found that advice to be all that helpful for me personally, so I would actually kind of amend that statement. I don't really think I can call this like a secret to success or anything like that, but at the very least on this subject, there actually is an attitude that I have found to be extraordinarily helpful when dealing with some of the more unsavory things, whether in this hobby or in regular life. And that attitude is simply this, that there are some people it's good to piss off. You know, as a very obvious, honestly kind of heavy-handed example, I'm an openly gay dude. It's come up in conversation that I have a husband, whatever. So you can imagine the kind of things that people say to and about me. Well, some people can't imagine that. Some people are utterly shocked, astonished, just clutching their pearls about the types of messages that I receive, or the types of messages that my black friends have received, or my trans friends, or the stuff that women have to put up with just by having the audacity to be women online. But I trust that you, the viewer, can fill in some gaps here. So when I see that, when they antagonize my friends, or when it comes my way, when someone finds out that I'm married to a dude and therefore goes to locate me in 3 different online spaces to call me a truly, thank goodness. Thank goodness they can't stand me. I'd feel so much worse about myself if that type of person was a fan of me. They don't like me? What a relief. What a relief. Clearly a sign that I'm doing something right. And honestly, I love it when the trash takes itself out. So yeah, there are some people out there where if they don't like you, honestly, take that as a good thing. That is an attitude that I find helpful sometimes, and hopefully it's helpful for someone else out there too. Now that can help with the stings that you might encounter from interactions with one type of crowd, but obviously that's not the only type of crowd. You know, flip side, there are also those people who you value very, very much, whose thoughts and opinions you hold in high regard. That's what friends are, right? Like, of course you care what they think of you. You think highly of them. They're the people whose good games you don't want to puncture, the folks who you don't want to look foolish in front of, who you don't want to mislead, the people that you want to give respect to and hopefully earn respect from. What about all of those stings of insecurity from your interactions with those folks? What do you do about those here in this hobby that we've devoted so much of ourselves to? Well, I'm not going to solve all of anxiety in a single Magic the Gathering video, but let me at least say this. What are those stings? Well, there are moments where you feel an awkward disconnect between how you perceive yourself and how you're being perceived. In other words, those stings are signals, uncomfortable ones, but signals nonetheless, that you care about other people, that you value them. And I know a lot of people try to act like it's cool to not care, but I find it pretty cool to care. You know, you don't need to care more about them than you do about yourself. There's no reason to be self-effacing, but I've already mentioned how the people who don't care at all aren't really my jam. Insecurity is vulnerability. It means being uncertain about yourself and anxiety of feeling unprotected, exposed, open to danger or threat. In a game of Commander, we're trained that we never want to be exposed like that, right? We never want shields down. We never want our creatures and our mana completely tapped out, our doors wide open for a crackback attack with no interaction to stop it. But also, think of all the times you had to go shields down to make a game-winning play. You had to take a risk, because playing it safe would have meant that the other player would just take over the game with their bigger value engine anyway. There are game moments where making yourself vulnerable is the right call. And I think there are even more social moments where making yourself vulnerable like that is the right call too. You know, I can't get to know a person whose shields are up, who's saying what they think they're supposed to say. I get to know a lot more about a person who's willing to take some risks. And you know what? When you take those risks, like when you cut that super popular card or when you make that risky play, maybe you are missing something. Maybe it was a bad move. But let he among us without sin be the first to condemn, right? Who here has only ever made perfect plays and perfect decks? Not only that, but if you are wrong about any of those things, you'll find that out in your own time, right? You might feel that sting and that might be uncomfortable, but I'd ask you, would you learn or grow from that experience without a sting like that? We don't improve at things when we're comfortable. Complacency is stagnation, is I think the phrase. Like, you get better at things when you're overcoming stuff that is difficult. That's why when people play Commander at a super fast level, they're not looking for pushover games. They're looking for adversity because they want to learn to overcome it. They want a challenge because that is what will make the win meaningful. That's what will help them grow. So not only are those occasional stings of insecurity a reminder that you just care about other people, which is, again, a good thing, but they're also sometimes just a sign of places where you can make changes and improve, which is one of the many beautiful things that gaming allows us to practice. So I know they suck sometimes, but don't punish yourself for feeling them. Look forward to the future where you'll be able to show people how much those moments have changed you. And remember also that even Sol Ring doesn't show up in 100% of eligible decks. You know, 88% of people might be playing some super popular card in your favorite Commander deck, but that means you've still got 12% of people who match up with you, and that's not nothing. So anyway, that's a video about how I'm making myself feel better about the fact that I don't play Grim Hireling in my Barakos deck. Could you tell that I was referencing a real personal example this whole time? 88% of people play that card in that deck. And I don't think they're wrong to do so. I just don't. And it's not a big deal. Literally none of my decks contain all of the top cards for any given commander's page after all. And I bet that's the case for a lot of you too. And sometimes when I get, deep in the tank tinkering with a deck, I can start to feel a little bit weird about some of those discrepancies, but my deck is mine. The plays and mistakes that I make with it are mine. And the fact that I feel so weird about it, the fact that I know I don't know everything, the fact that I sometimes feel insecure about it, means, I think, that I'm receptive to learning more from it as time goes on. Which is a vulnerable place to be, but that's exactly where we all need to be sometimes. Thank you for watching. I hope it was helpful. If you're feeling brave and want to discuss any particularly risky plays that you've made that maybe didn't pan out, or talk about any cards that you've questioned even though it might feel like going against the grain, the comment section is yours to command. Feel free to do the YouTube thingies while you're there too, by the way. Helps out a lot. And until next time, remember, EDH wreck your deck before you wreck your deck.